Bata SSL for $5 says, "Do you guys think that by the time the Gunverse gets going, do you think comic book movies will still be relevant?" Well, this is an interesting question. I mean, obviously, all the questions have been interesting, but this is an interesting one because, of course, like if Guardians flops, which again, his data set looks like it has a strong potential to do that. Will David Zaslav be regretting his decision? And again, by the time it gets going, which is like 2025, is that when Superman Legacy comes out? 2025. I mean, will they be relevant by then? They're slowly losing relevancy, but by that, by that sort of having that sort of decline does leave the door open for someone to come in and reignite it. But is Gunn and his Superman Legacy the right, match to the flame, so to speak? Is that the right fuel to reignite it?
I feel better about him taking on Superman after seeing Guardians 3. Although I was already.
God, I don't.
I do, but that's my personal. Because to me,
why? What about Guardians makes you think that he?
Because it showed that he could. Because everybody was like, "Oh, he can only do funny. He can only do funny. He can only do funny." It's like, well, you've clearly not seen Super or some of his other films. But that being said, he took what was already, notoriously probably the funniest of the Marvel films, and by the time you get to the end of the second film, I was bawling my brains out. At the "he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy" scene. I mean, that got me. And then this film, I didn't go into sobbing territory, but the whole theater I was in was crying through the last half of the movie almost. Like, it was insane. So I'm like, this guy knows how to manipulate an audience. That is more important than a lot of things. That is why James Cameron, Kubrick, certain Scorsese's another one of these guys, Tarantino. There's certain directors who know how to just grab you and pull you along. And you don't even sometimes question some of the shit, but until you get to the other end of the movie. Now, granted, you, Nate, did not have the experience a lot of us did with Guardians 3. And I'll admit, it's not as good as the first two. No. It clearly has some issues. It's wearing the weight of all these notes and problems that the studio put on it. The fact that it has to finish up all these storylines. It's Gunn's, adios amigo to the MCU. I have a feeling though, I feel better now about him taking over DC than I have in a long time. Because I feel like he's going to take this seriously. I think he knows the weight that it is, the pressure that it is. And I've seen some interviews where even though he has said some stupid shit here and there online, one thing that he has said that I think that he's smart is he said he's not going to be political anymore. He has learned his lesson.
Good.
Well, he has said flat out, it is not a good idea to be political because it just divides people. And have you not noticed he has not said anything political in the last at least year or more? So I hope that he knows, and all the stuff he's posting on Superman, it's Donner stuff, a lot of Alex Ross art.
Yeah, it's very sort of legacy. Well,
exactly. Legacy, so I'm hoping what we get feels like what everybody imagines Superman to be. Could be wrong, but I'm hoping it's decent.
Well, it makes me feel good that it's the Ross art that's getting posted.
That and the Donner stuff, right? Because he clearly gets what I mean. I'm not expecting it to be Donner Ray Do, right? We've already gotten that with Bryan Singer's Superman Returns,
right?
But I want something that's in the spirit of that, and I think that's what he's going for.
It's going to be hard because he's picked a really weird period of time with a.
Well, not to get too off topic from the super chat, but do we think that they will still be relevant at that time?
Well, that's a good question. And what point I was going to get to was, okay, we have the writer's strike right now, which is basically bringing every Marvel project to a screeching halt.
Well, Blade was canceled.
Blade has it been canceled, or is it just
it's postponed? But that
postponed. And last we heard the Avengers movie hadn't even started yet writing yet. So the only movies and shows that are done are like Loki season 2 and a couple other things. Marvel's obviously. I don't know if there's any movies. Agatha's done. I think there's a couple series done, but after Marvel's, I don't think there's any movies done. That's my point I was going to get to. Yeah. So we're going to have a gap here of 2-3 years between now and whatever Marvel comes up with next. And then also same thing with DC. The only movies we got coming out between now and then is Aquaman and Blue Beetle and Joker. And Joker's an also Rand anyway. So
they're in so much trouble. They're in so much trouble.
You will get a gap. I think that might work in the favor. Now, it's not going to be a very big gap, but to the way the world is now, it's going to feel like it. It's going to be almost like a whole year without superhero movies. 2024 is going to be the year that's devoid of a ton of superhero movies.
But
so
we'll
see how that affects it. Yeah.
What I was going to say, so on that note, do we think that will be positive or negative? Because for the likes of, say, China, it proved to be an incredibly negative element for them. They came back to, watching Marvel movies, and they were incredibly disinterested as a result of the hiatus that Marvel had in China. So do you think that although it's a different form of a hiatus, right? It's a break. There's not still being made, and we're just not getting, to watch them like China did. But will that hiatus make people their interest, divert to something else? Maybe.
Let me use a restaurant as an analogy real quick. It is better to run out of meat and have to close down for a little bit and wait for the meat to come back in to open up your business because business is booming, than it is to close down and try and revamp it, which is ostensibly what's going to happen on the MCU front in this case. This is the one time where I think that, like I was saying, the gap is going to help a lot of people go, oh yeah, it's been a while since I've seen. Oh yeah, Deadpool 3 is supposed to be here. I thought that is 2024. I thought it was the end of this year. You're right, it is 2024. Thank you. So outside of Deadpool, which again is also kind of an also Rand of sorts, if you look at it that way. It's not directly tied into anything else. I think that people will have to see how they feel on the other end of this. What James Gunn will have going for him, and he'll be lucky, is if come summer 2025, we have been that far removed from a bunch of DC stuff and Marvel stuff that people will be like, you know what? A fun Superman movie sounds good right now. Then again, it could fall flat on its face. So
I don't see superhero films lasting much longer regardless, writer strike or no. I think that they are well on their way out. I think Hollywood has seen diminishing returns for too long. The magic in a bottle that they thought, or the lightning in a bottle they thought they had caught, they did not. And in fact, they squandered it. Again, with a lot of messaging and other things that people weren't interested in. People like good and evil. They like hero stories, and Disney and many of the other companies don't know how to write a villain anymore because they just identify with them, which is a real problem. And they're not wrong. They are the villains. They want people to like them for being the villains that they are, and nobody does. Regardless, taking a pause might help, but I doubt it. I think Tom's right. I think it's over, and I think the Marvels is going to close the book rather quickly on that, and I think that maybe we don't get a lot of things that were announced in the MCU. I think maybe Disney quietly sets the MCU down to maybe one film a year, maybe two, maybe one series a year on Disney Plus, maybe two. We'll see. Will they learn that lesson? They usually are the last to learn. They're the last to turn it around.
For sure.
They have to fail. I mean, Tom brings up the story all the time. They have to be damn near failure before they pivot to a different direction. It took two coups by Roy O. Disney in the form of Eisner and then in the form of Iger to get the company to pivot out of very poor directions and poor leadership. We'll see if it happens again.
Well, what do you think, Nick, to close out our thoughts on that? You've been quiet.
I mean, one part of me thinks a nice little break from the superhero movies will be a good thing. Like if you haven't seen one come out in a while, and then, a year, 2 years out, and, one comes out, maybe it gets a lot of hype built up around it or something. And people are like, I haven't seen a superhero movie in a long time in the theater. Like, I think I'm going to go check this out. Then another part of me sees a lot of people just being like what Culture was saying, being checked out. The MCU, it just keeps heading in a downward spiral. But the thing about them is they knew what the top was. And I don't see them learning their lesson. I see them going, okay, how can we fix this and get back to that point and keep trying to throw stuff out there to try to make it stick. Like, hey, we were killing it with this Marvel thing, so let's keep working and trying to get back to that point. And I see them just, ultimately failing, but continuing to try to get back to that point and not learning their lesson. And being like, okay, maybe we need to switch gears here, completely turn things around, get a whole new story together, and get away from the message or any agendas, and get back to just a good, entertaining comic book movie or series of movies. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess.
I will agree with that.